गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्मा गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः।
जय गणेश जय गणेश जय गणेश पाहि मां श्री गणेश श्री गणेश रक्ष मां। शरवण भव पाहि मां कार्तिकेय 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 रक्ष मां। जय सरस्वती पाहि मां श्री सरस्वती रक्ष मां। जय गुरु शिव गुरु हरि गुरु राम जगद्गुरु परम गुरु सद्गुरु श्याम। ओम आदि गुरु अद्वैत गुरु आनंद गुरु ओम चिद गुरु चिद्घन गुरु चिन्मय गुरु ओम। हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे। नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय ओम। ओम नमो नारायणाय ओम नमो नारायणाय ओम नमो नारायणाय ओम नमो नारायणाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते रामचंद्राय। आंजनेय 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 पाहि मां हनुमंत 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 रक्ष मां। दत्तात्रेय 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 पाहि मां दत्तगुरु 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 रक्ष मां। शंकराचार्य 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 पाहि मां भगवत्पाद 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 रक्ष मां। गंगारानी 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 पाहि मां भागीरथी 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 रक्ष मां। सद्गुरुदेव 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 पाहि मां शिवानंद 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 रक्ष मां। Hari Om. Yesterday I was telling you about the trial of Socrates. As you already know, all this literature has come down to us through Plato, who was the foremost disciple of Socrates. He has written a wonderful dialogue. Dialogue means a book. All his writings are called dialogues, dialogues of Plato. An apology, the trial and death of Socrates. That is the title of the book, An Apology, the trial and death of Socrates. I would wish each one of you to read it. It is a very small book, very lucidly, very wonderfully written. You can surmise the quality of the book when I tell you Will Durant, who has written a very readable history of Western philosophy, writes about Plato. His language, meaning his prose, he has written all these things in prose. His prose is better than poetry. Plato's versatility and command on the language you can surmise from this remark. His prose is better than poetry. You should read it. It is a very moving book, very moving dialogue. It is a wonderfully written dialogue. You should each one read it. It is a small book. A number of dialogues he has written. Wonderful account of Socratic times have come down to us, and it is through him only that we know whatever we know about Socrates. Socrates himself never wrote anything. He has described the scene very poignantly in that book. Socrates was put to death because, as I told you, there was an irretrievable gulf of enmity and hostility between Socratic band on the one side and the sophists on other. As I told you, the sophists catered to the need of the ruling elite, to the ruling class, and naturally they had the sympathies of the powers that be. Socrates was always a torture to them because whatever they professed and preached, Socrates was the very opposite of it all. So much so, things went so far. I will describe one incident. There are countless incidents, not one. If you read, you would very much enjoy. I can guarantee that thing. Your enjoyment I can guarantee. But whether you will read or not, that you will have to guarantee. Once it so happened, Socrates and his band of admirers, he was always surrounded by his band of admirers, and truly he deserved it also. The youth of the country followed him almost madly in a frenzy. And when you follow a person, you neglect your proper vocation in life, whatever you are. They were standing under a tree. A sophist, a professional teacher of the day, recognized teacher, sophist. We are used to decrying sophists, but that is very unjust of us. Those sophists rendered yeoman service to humanity, how you will see in course of time. He was passing very hurriedly that way. They all saw him going so very quickly. So one of them happened to know him. He called him out, wished him, and asked him, where was you going so hurriedly? What was the hurry after all? He said he was going to his home. Oh, they said, why? But going home, what is so very big hurry about it? Home you go every day. What is very special today? He tells them, yes, today is very special. I am reminded I have to do a duty at my home, and the more quickly I do it, the better it is. So they asked him what was his duty. He said, I am going to my house to beat my father. To beat your father, they were all shocked. This is your duty? Okay, yes, yes. Socrates says all debts must be repaid. My father used to beat me when I was a boy. I am going to pay back the debt. This is what, the sophist told them. You can imagine the undercurrent of hostility, ill will, hatred, all these things were there. They were all causes adding up to his death. There is always an immediate cause also. War, every event has two sets of causes, the remote causes and the immediate cause. These were all remote causes. They were building up to the end of Socrates. Then there was an immediate cause also. There was a leather merchant by name Alcibiades. Alcibiades. No, Alcibiades was the student of Socrates. His father was a leather merchant. He was a prosperous businessman. And as I told you, the youth followed madly Socrates. Alcibiades neglected his father's business and was usually following Socrates from here to there. This man brought a charge against Socrates that he was corruptizing his son and he was neglecting his business and avoiding to be a dutiful son. The charge was brought against Socrates. It was upheld, and that was the immediate cause for the trial. I told you yesterday about the three charges that were brought against Socrates. In passing, I told you the first was corruptizing the youth of the country. That was the first charge, and the immediate cause was this. The grouse of Alcibiades, his father. When Socrates in a battle had once saved the life of this boy, he had saved the life of this boy. His father brought a charge against Socrates and it was upheld. Another charge was denying the gods of the Greek pantheon. Like us, they also had a number of gods and goddesses, the Greeks also. All people at the beginning perhaps have such types of mechanism, systems, a number of gods and goddesses. Because when man first came on the globe, he was a bewildered person. He failed to grasp and understand what exactly everything about him was. So everywhere he posited a power which he could worship and keep placated for his interest. It was there also. He denied the gods of the Greek pantheon and said there is only one God only. Socrates did not deny God. He said there is only one God only. He was an absolute believer in God. But this was the charge brought against him. And because he said there is one God only, they said he substituted his own God in place of the gods and goddesses of the Greek pantheon. These three charges were brought against him. They were upheld and he was awarded the death sentence. He had to be killed. He was 70 years old at that time. When the sentence was announced, he was put in the jail. He stayed in the jail room for a day Plato has very graphically described this scene. They are all huddled together in a room. Socrates and his students, his band of admirers, all very unhappy, some sobbing, some even weeping mutely, grieving. This was the scene. Socrates breaks the silence and calls them aloud and says, "See, what is this? I sent the women and the children out thinking they are chicken hearted, but you are more chicken hearted than women and children. You are man, you should be manly. Why do you grieve? Why do you sob? Why do you weep? Why are you unhappy?" And like this, he pulls them up. Then Socrates tells one of his disciples, Plato, ask the jailer to bring the cup of poison. In those days, when people were awarded the death sentence, they would be asked to drink a cup of poison, hemlock, as it was called, a cup of poison. A cup would be given to them and they would be asked to drink it. They would drink and they would die. That is how capital punishment was meted out. So he asked his student Plato, ask the jailer to bring the cup of hemlock. Plato is irritated and tells, Master, what is the hurry? Why do you hurry about it? People have delayed it. He is irritated because his teacher, his dearest teacher, was parting from them all. Socrates tells him mildly, see, Plato, others may have profited by delaying it. I don't see any profit in delaying it. Call the jailer to bring in the cup of hemlock. Plato goes out, calls the jailer, he brings the cup of hemlock. Very apologetically he comes inside and says, see, Socrates, I am not answerable for all this. It is they who punished you for this. I have nothing to do with it. Socrates tells him, no, you have been very considerate to me since I came here. You have been very nice to me. Tell me, what do I have to do? He says, you only drink it and that is all. Socrates drinks the cup of poison and asks him, now, he says, you keep walking a few paces for a few minutes and then the poison will do its job. Socrates keeps walking for a while, then he tells him his legs are feeling heavy. He is feeling his legs heavy. The jailer tells him, you now sleep, lie down, and the poison will do the rest of its job. He lies down. And then he calls aloud, Crito. Crito is an uncle of Plato. Plato, Crito, they all came from aristocratic families. Socrates himself came from a very humble family. He was a statue maker, no doubt, but he made no statues. He was moving about from place to place only, and his wife was midwife. She earned a little bit and she was always complaining and grousing against Socrates. Her famous remark, Socrates only brought more notoriety into the home than bread, has come down into history. She was always complaining and grumbling against Socrates for he hardly earned anything. But these people, Crito, Plato, they came from aristocratic families. Socrates calls aloud, Crito. Crito answers, yes, master. Socrates tells him, Crito, I owe a cock to Asclepius. Would you make sure to return the debt? Crito answers, yes, master, the debt shall be repaid. He asks then, anything more? No voice is heard. And Socrates, from a small sleep, has passed into an eternal sleep. He hugged death to protect for all time our right to say what we want to say. That is the first martyr to philosophy, a man who laid down his life for the right of free speech and the right of free thinking. That is the end of Socrates. This, account, if you read first hand, of course you would get immense pleasure. And if you cultivate a love for reading, your life will be enriched. This much I can guarantee. There is a Greek proverb, pleasures of the heart become sorrow. Those of sense pall with time, but those of the mind are with us to the end of our journey. If you cultivate a habit for reading, reading will give you immense joy, permanent joy. This much I can guarantee you. You should read it yourself first time. This is a second-hand account you have heard from me, heard in a very summary manner. So I would wish you to read it. An apology, the trial and death of Socrates. Even otherwise also the dialogues of Plato are very beautifully written, very lucid accounts they are, and of course very, very meaningful. He is the mightiest philosopher, Plato. So this was, the life of Socrates. That is how he lived. Now, we shall have a look at what the sophists were doing. It has become fashionable to derogate sophists and their contribution, but they also rendered a human service. They awakened the faculties of man. In a way, we can say they awakened the mind of man. Till the sophists, you read in your account of Western philosophy, all the philosophers who preceded them were to be called physical philosophers. They were all physical philosophers because they studied the physical phenomenon outside. Space occupying things are physical, material things are physical, and they were all physical philosophers. They studied the nature outside. It is with the sophists for the first time that we learn to look within ourselves and come to realize the majesty of mind. We decry and devalue sophists, but a very modern school of philosophy, of course, very much refined and replenished, that is there. Pragmatism is also the cult of expediency. What serves your purpose is good. There is another school of moral philosophy in ethics, the pleasure principle. They also say, why do we feel peevish? It is a fact we naturally seek our pleasure, and therefore why should we be apologetic about it? Let us accept we seek our pleasure, though in truth we do not naturally seek our pleasure. We seek objects of pleasure, or rather objects of gratification and satisfaction. That is not our part of study here, but it is also a very mighty system, the pleasure principle, hedonism. We do not naturally seek it. But our self-interest we do naturally seek. In very few instances where the conscience is very highly made of preferences and maxims, people go in ordinarily for the service of their own particular interest, parochial interest. They challenged and then they questioned the traditional wisdom that you should speak the truth, you should be honest, and you should be all this. Why should you be all this? This is what the sophists ask. Where do you get this sanction? Look at nature. Nature is indifferent to all this. Nature is neither moral nor immoral, it is amoral. Is there justice? Is there fair play in nature? The lion always eats the lamb. Right, wrong, good, bad, indifferent, whatever it is. Nature is indifferent to your considerations of morality. Therefore, the best thing is serve your purpose, make a successful, happy living. That is right. Nature, all sorts of philosophies are there, this side, that side. Yesterday I told you, Nietzsche said, the weak have no right to live on earth. This is one philosophy. The whole of Christian lore is devoted to this self-sufficient humanism, is their article of faith. Self-sufficient humanism. This is their article of highest faith. You know the spectrums too. All sorts of philosophies are there. People have thought it is the mind of man who thinks on everything. You choose, you accept what appeals to you and what sounds to you rational. In any case, you will choose only what is rational. Ordinarily, man does not choose the irrational unless governed by a very powerful vested interest. That is a different thing. So they challenged all traditional morality thinking. The old values, loosened their grip. The new values had not yet emerged. This is what, if you look at yourself, at ourselves, has been happening to us. The old order has gone away. The old values, moral values, cultural values, have ceased to hold sway, and new values have not yet been created. We are living in a sort of vacuum. That is our predicament today. This is what, the sophists did, but they activated the majesty of the mind of man. What arguments do you advise to justify the denial of your self-interest? Look at nature. Nature does it all. Nature protects the weak also. Weaker animals are created that way. Their skin, their paws, their legs, tails, that nature provides them a semblance, at least a semblance of protection from mightier animals. Checks and balances, as it is called, is in nature. It is a way of looking at things. If you see nature immoral, as Tennyson uses the word, nature red in tooth and claw. Nature red in tooth and claw. What does it mean? When a beast of prey pounces upon its prey, it tears it into pieces. Its teeth become bloody, paws also bloody. That is what he says. Nature is very cruel and ruthless. Nature is soft also. Both ways you can look, you can understand, you can surmise. The sophists brought in this argument chiefly, nature does not sanction morality. It is amoral. At best, nature is neutral to moral considerations. If by speaking the truth you lose, do not surely speak the truth. Speak the untruth and guard your interest. This is what the Sufis asserted. Expediency, the cult of expediency. But in order to be able to protect your interests, you must have a very quick and sharp mind. That is why the Sufis were teaching rhetoric. Use of weaponry is for your protection, for your security. But rhetoric is for this reason, for this purpose. You must be very sharp in argumentative ability. So many fallacies, errors, deliberate errors which you make are there. Why are they all? Because you can protect your interest, your self-interest. All external goods collected cannot be accounted for rationally or morally. They will have to be answered for somewhere in an element of force or subterfuge. And to justify it, you should be very sharp-witted. This is what the Sufis did. There is no end to fallacies because you are not reading logic here. In logic, you have rather a detailed study of it. But I gave you a sample yesterday. They cheated people. And the Sufis had one duty only, to defend the dispensation available then, the political dispensation. What type of political dispensation it was, you can surmise when I tell you. Vildura has written it. The population of Athens in those days, in the Socratic era, was 4 lakh people. 4 lakh. But my opinion is, it does not go down the throat, my throat, which is beside the point. Nobody has asked for my opinion, but I cannot resist giving my opinion that it cannot be 4 lakhs at that time. About 300 years before the birth of Christ, the population of Athens, he says, it is 4 lakhs. It may be. We have to accept it. Anyway, that is not important. The important thing is, out of these 4 lakhs, 2.5 lakhs were serfs. Serfs means servants, bonded labor type thing, who had no social and political rights. That means you have to provide for only 1.5 lakh people. Out of 4 lakhs, if 2.5 lakh are ruled out, you have to provide for 1.5 lakh only. This you had to provide for. And the Supreme Court was constituted in alphabetical order. Supreme Court, who are required to dole out justice, it was constituted in an alphabetical order, by the name in alphabetical order, and it consisted of 1,000 people. We have 10-12 judges in the Supreme Court today. At that time, there were 1,000 judges in the Supreme Court at that time. Why? To make bribery impossible. You cannot bribe 1,000 people, you can bribe 2 people easily. Anyway, and the best remark that Vildura passes on it is, no institution in the world could be more democratic than this, neither more absurd than this. This was the sort of democracy which was prevalent in those days. There were these causes also. Socrates came from a very humble family, but he had a pronounced preference for aristocracy. and his dearest disciple also was Plato. There is so much to tell you about Socrates, the quality of man. When Socrates was in prison, Plato went to him and told him, Master, I have bribed your way to freedom. I have bribed the jailer, everything. I have managed your escape. You come along now, leave Athens, and we will go to another city-state. You could do it. There were city-states only. Just as we had Indian princely states before our freedom, we had Indian princely states like this also. Socrates told him, Plato, the laws of Athens have protected me for 70 years. I will not flout them in my end. I will not insult them in my end. I will respect them. The laws of Athens have punished me to death. I will undergo the sentence cheerfully. I will not dishonor them. This is what Socrates told. There was this animosity going on, Cold War sort of state, between Socrates and his band on the one side and the sophists on the other. Some neutral people who were not inclined this side or that side, they asked, after all, what is this? The sophists say Socrates is a nuisance. Socrates says sophists are traders in falsehood and wrongdoing. What is it? What do we do in such a predicament these days? Usually we go to an astrologer. Let us go to an astrologer and ask for his opinion. They used to maintain temples, as we have temples. They called them oracles. And usually in Greece, the oracles were kept by the priestess, female worshippers, priestess. There was one famous, very famous oracle, very famous in history, oracle of Delphi. So people went to the oracle of Delphi and asked the priestess, what do you say? They say Socrates is a wise man. So many others say he is a cheat. Whatever. What do you say to it? The priestess, after her formality being completed, woke up from the trance. Her method was there. She would go in a trance for a while and then get up, wake up and say. When she woke up from the trance, she announced, verily, I say, Socrates is the wisest of all Greeks. Socrates is the wisest of all Greeks. This is what the priestess of oracle of Delphi pronounced. They were followers of Socrates who went to the oracle. They were very jubilant and returned very happily and broke the news to Socrates and told him, Master, you are the wisest of all Greeks. The oracle has declared it. Now what do you say to it? Socrates in his modesty said, yes, I am the wisest of all Greeks, no doubt. The oracle has said very rightly. But not in the sense that I possess wisdom, but in the sense that I know I do not have wisdom. This is what Socrates said. Try to understand the meaning of this remark. I know I do not have wisdom, meaning nobody accepts his ignorance. I am willing and I am always quick to accept my ignorance. In this respect, I am the wisest of all. Because it is very, very difficult and painful for a man to accept his ignorance. If you want to flatter a man profusely, go to a fool and call him the wisest of all men. He will be the happiest man. If you call him a fool, which he truly is, he will beat you out of his home. So, you know, Socrates is here bringing out a truth. It is very difficult for a man to submit his pet theories to scrutiny or to judgment. If you read the history of man, very cruel instances you will come across where simply to defend one's pet theories only, did not go to what extent. The earth moves round the sun. A third class student today knows it. But you don't know how much price man paid for it. Bruno was killed. Galileo lived a madman. Copernicus was also punished heavily. Simply because they said it is the earth which moves round the sun. The religion proclaims man is made in the image of God and man resides on earth. The earth cannot be perambulating the sun must perambulate the earth. I have read the life of Galileo, very tragic. For a number of years he lived like a madman. I am inclined to tell you, Galileo, Copernicus he invented the telescope and found that it is the earth which revolves. He mutely came out with his theory, then Galileo propounded it vociferously. Galileo was prevailed upon accepting the religious view that the sun moves round the earth. Empirical evidence also points to it. We see the sun moving, not the earth moving. He was tempted with an enmity in all these things. He declined. Then the punishment in those days was such a wise man and learned man talking irreligious things from their point of view was considered to have been possessed by a demon. His soul has been possessed by a devil. So the punishment was burning at the stakes. Burning at the stakes. Man was taken out. He was tied to a tree or a heavy post and burned alive. That is known as burning at the stakes. He was taken to the stakes. Galileo went there, saw the stake, saw the faggots burning, everything, and he was horrified at the sight of it. Common sense prevailed upon him, and he said, cleverly rather, that he would like to apologize, and now he has realized the truth. The earth does not move, it is the sun only which moves. The priests were very happy. They said, very, very wonderful, you know. The angels have rescued you and you recant. When Christians beg forgiveness, they bend on their knees and withdraw whatever wrong they did. They feel sorry for the sins they have done. So, Galileo recanted. The whole bench of bishops was there. Very vividly it has been described. Galileo was taken to the stakes. It was burning there, but he was not tied to it because he had recanted already. The bishops were very happy and told him to recant. He bent on his knees and recanted, withdrawing his theory. And when he got up from the knees, people saw him. But all the same it moves. But all the same it moves. You may do anything, it is the earth which is moving only, not the sun. I may say anything, but it is the earth which is moving. That is very also poignantly described. So this price, mankind has paid for even ordinary knowledge. It is a very difficult job staying against the current. But man has lived through these periods also, these pangs also. And coming back to our sophists, now so far you have heard only about Socrates. What about his philosophy? This is your philosophy class, not your story class. What is his contribution to philosophy? See, the Sophists said one thing: whatever your opinion, you do it. And opinion varies from man to man, all true things. And therefore, do what you like. And naturally, you will do only what serves your purpose, what profits you, what gains you. No two opinions are alike. That is also true. Socrates came and said, don't go by opinion. Opinions come and go. You are a rational being. You are endowed with reason. You should reason out things. And you can reason out things only on the basis of knowledge available to you. Now we enter into the question of knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is not opinion, because opinion is shifting like the sands. No two opinions are alike. They are not permanent. They are not rationally built. Why do I want it? Because I like it. And why do you like it? Hari Om.